Hello, YouTube. Welcome back to the channel. So, a familiar face from a previous episode that we had done. Oh, as always, links will be in the description where appropriate. But I've got Jake, 90s B-ball cards. Once again, we need to have another collector conversation, a passionate collector conversation, playing with the branding. Jake, how are you today?
Carlos, I'm doing well. Always fun to come and talk about cards. And I just so happened, this was sheer coincidence, I'm rocking a Packers jersey today. So
Beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. We'll definitely talk about that. One of the things. So, if you guys remember, that's why I say I'll include a link in the description if you want to go. We had a brief discussion, a couple of minutes, I think. So we had a brief discussion on the first one. We talked a lot about content. We may still touch on that a little bit here and there because it's one of my favorite topics, honestly, when it comes to the YouTube space. So if it's appropriate, we'll talk about it. But I wanted to put the emphasis this time. If you guys remember on the first one, I stayed away from a lot of the '90s cards and and certainly didn't touch on basketball at all. But I want to touch on a couple of those things. This is going to be the more card centric. So this part two, we're going to really get into a little bit more on the cards. So if you guys were waiting for that, we're going to hit that this time around. And we're going to talk a little bit about the football as well, since Jake is also a Packers fan from a contrarian standpoint, which I appreciate. And then I got this going on here. I got this going on, we'll work it. And I got some of my Brett Favre's over here. We'll talk a little bit about that and touch on it, but also how it links 90s wise with inserts and parallels and things that also were in other sports. We can talk a little bit about that. So we'll touch on that as well. So first of all, one of the things we did talk about before we hit record, I'll touch on it briefly. We'll give the short version, the update. So Becket still isn't looking good, Jake. we led the last conversation with a conversation of Becket. It hasn't gotten better. It's been a while, but it's still not improving.
Yeah, no, and I just don't know if they have any interest in improving, to be honest, to be completely frank. Like we were talking about before, I'm a admitted Becket fanboy, and it's tough when you're sitting on a couple free submissions and you don't have any cards that you'd feel comfortable sending to them right now. I have no problem buying already slab Becket cards, but yeah, it's not a fun time to be a fan of Becket. So
yeah, that's fair. And as I say, your point about having the option to have some free ones and it still can't quite get yourself there because of the operation that's happening right now. It's like it's about as damning as it gets. That's why I think on my channel, when we do a lot of live streams, obviously we'll have a lot of fun with Becket and pick them apart a fair bit. But Eric, who talks very passionately about his Becket distaste at this point, the thing is, it comes from a position of once having great respect and reverence for the brand. So in reality, it's more of a disappointment turning to anger. He's representing kind of that side of it. If he didn't care or like it in the first place, you wouldn't be getting the strong reaction that you're getting to where they are at now, which is something that maybe Becket should take note of. It's your old fans that are the angriest people. Those of us who are kind of like, with you a little bit, like, look, at the end of the day, I can take it or leave it, whatever. But it's your fanboys who are getting mad. They're the ones that are really upset. Something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
So let's lean into the card side of things a little bit. Being that you are 90s b-ball cards, obviously we can get into the 90s. I think that's an appropriate place to go. Now, one of the things I touched on briefly when we were talking just before we hit record here is that you see the proliferation and the increase in the amount of sets and brands in that. And your channel is a good representative of that because you've opened different packs and different boxes and seen the innovation was amazing. The technology was amazing. There's a lot of portions of that. Now, this is actually a little different angle, still related because I'm not going to leave the cards. We're going to stick to the cards, but I wanted to get your take on this because this is something I recently became a little annoyed with myself. One of the things that the 90s brought is because so many of the designs are iconic. It leads, obviously, people to collect them aggressively, especially now. The prices have escalated on them, although, we're getting fluctuation with the market now. It's adjusting a little bit. But one of the things it also does is it leads the companies to look at it and go, especially if they have the rights, they're like, oh, we could probably still milk this for some money with some of the new ones. So I'll use a specific example. Topps/Fanatics. Mind you, I'm willing to completely change my stance if the Fanatics overlords want to cut a big enough check. Then I love everything they do. It's perfection. Moi, chef's kiss. But in the meantime, let's criticize it. So what they did is they do a lot of the Topps finest flashbacks. That's what they're doing with the baseball side of things. And the flashbacks are bringing back the old finest designs. They started doing that a couple of years ago with 1993 finest baseball. Then they did 94. Then they did 95. Now, one of the conversations I had with another great collector, Cards and Comics, Jason, who's a big time fan of Ken Griffey, big collector, Frank Thomas, a lot of the great 90s greats, is that he loves a lot of those sets and the technology, much like myself and yourself. But one of the dangers, one of the conversations we last had is I said, I'm worried about this year them going to the 1996 Topps Finest.
Mm.
Reason being that this was going to be the greatest challenge because you got the 3-tiered base set system. You got the different refractors going with each version of it.
Yep.
So the question is, were you going to be able to do it justice? That's the
Mm.
question posed before, because I said, oh, it isn't going to get easier. 96 is tougher than any of the ones they've done so far. They've done a reasonable job. I think they've done okay. But 96 is tougher. And 97, there's embossed. There's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
That's a lot trickier. I got to get one in hand to be 100% sure, but I'll give my early review. My early review is I'm a little worried that they half-assed it. And by that I mean that when I looked at the cards that were coming out, the subset designs looked okay. I think they were fairly faithful to the original. This is where you get into a danger zone because you're using nostalgia bait here. About nostalgia last time. But if you're going to do it justice. Otherwise, it actually could go worse than you think, as opposed to coming up with just a half-baked idea from a new half-baked idea. So I looked at it, and my screen isn't set up for perfect color matching and all that. But the browns look more like a brown. The silver look more like a gray. I got to get it in hand to do the comparison, but I feel like it's not quite. It looks a little muted compared to the OG version, and that's a worry of mine. So here's my question to you. What do you think about them trying occasionally to bring back some of these old designs and not necessarily doing justice with them? How do you actually feel about how that plays out?
Yeah, like we saw that in the early 2000s with like jambalayas for basketball, right? We've got a number of iterations, and I don't feel as though any one of them really did it justice. Now, there are a couple that they kind of like took some creative liberties that we're going to make a new version, which was not a new version of the jambalaya. But then I remember like I think it was 06, they were like, this is the old revised version, right? Basically, it was the closest to the original, which I mean, I actually liked it. But if you go and look at the Jordan jambalayas from the various years, you'll notice the prices, unless it's the year that they significantly short printed the Jordan, the 97 is gonna be the more sought after, the more desirable one. So like in general, I like a good homage to a classic, but I don't like a complete retread. It feels to me a little bit lazy, like we need to stuff something in the product and we didn't know what. But like a good homage, so what I'm thinking of is if you're sitting there thinking of a classic 90s insert set, so let's go with the cut above, right?
Sure.
And you want to do an homage to that. So you're going to say, we're going to use the set name, call it a cut above. And what made cut above really iconic was the die cutting, right? So we're going to go with that theme, but do it a little differently, right? We're still going to call it the same thing. We're not going to try to retread it. But we're also not going to hide the fact that this is an homage to the 90s, right? Like really play it justice and talk about that. I'm okay with that once in a while, but I don't want to see it be an annual thing, right?
Sure.
So
I'll give you an example of kind of as well that had been done in the past of kind of the same problem. Jason brought this one up, which I think is valid because I actually have the original set of these I was able to put together. So this is the 2017 Bowman Best Cuts, which was, supposed to be, I can't even call it an homage because it's a straight ripoff of the 1997 version, design-wise. However, there's a few problems, and it becomes very apparent if you're looking at the picture that I'm sharing on the screen here. So what happens is the 2017 version, if you have the OG version where it says best cuts and the little diamond things over on the right side, those are all die cut, which is to say you should be able to see through the card to the other side. It's literally laser cut with the lettering, and it's laser cut with the little diamonds in the bottom. I have a complete set of the atomic refractors, and they look gorgeous. For the baseball, again, it is laser cut, the real 97 version. This is the 2017. We did it again with newer guys. It's not die cut at all. It's literally just it's outlined. So this is you took. So that's why I was making the point about the nostalgia thing. So you're actually trying to, and this is a discussion I had with a buddy of mine. It said, well, they're trying to kind of bring in people, and I said, well, the problem is you're not. because the people that weren't around in 97, you're not going to hit their nostalgia with an old design that this other person's not going to care about. So you are trying to get the person who remembers the OG design. But here's the problem. You just gave me a really lame version of the original one. It's like making a candy that got discontinued, and it's like, but I remember what it tasted like, and then you remade it. It doesn't taste like the original.
Right.
So it's actually worse that you did it wrong. I would actually rather if you had just come up with a newer idea that was half-assed. Maybe it was ugly or whatever, but it's like, all right, but at least it's your idea. At least if it's half-assed, it was your idea, as opposed to taking one. I already know what the original looked like. That's why I gave the example with the colors and the finest flashbacks. And I said, but I remember what the original color looks like, and it's like, right. Immediately looking at it, it struck me that it's like, I don't think you guys got it right. And you could have just bought one on the secondary market and seen what the color looked like. It's like, why don't you just copy that? At least if you're going to copy it, at least copy it correctly.
Right. Well, and that also makes me think of it might have been 2022, but so Panini with their NBA Hoops product, they had an insert set called Net Assets. Now, Net Assets for the 90s basketball collectors, remember that from 96 EX 2000. And it was such a, I loved it. That one of my friends had pulled a Jordan. So it was like, a monolithic card for us. But it was such an intricate die cut, laser cut design, like the best cuts that you're talking about. So when I saw that Hoops was going to have a Net Assets insert set, I was like, oh, you know what? Those are probably going to be really hard to hit because, if they're paying homage to the Net Assets from the 90s, it's going to be super die cut. It's not going to be an easy insert. I'd like to try to get one. And then it came out, and there's no die cut, right? And basically they just have a brown border, and then they have like a circle that's supposed to be like a hoop in the middle with like a net just, printed on there. And then like the portions that would be cut out if it was to be like a good homage are just white, and then you've got the player kind of like in front of the net. And I'm like, yeah, see, they just were lazy, and they're like, Net Assets, yep, this was popular, let's do that. And it's like that. It wasn't popular because of what it was called. It was popular because the design was a very intricate, very delicate and fragile die cut, which honestly was borrowed from Press Pass and their Net Burner set, but that's that's beside the point. We could take inspiration from other companies and do it a different way. But yeah, that's not what happened with the Panini Hoops.
Sure. And I think though the key piece and kind of what you're talking about and what I'm talking about is that now if we're playing devil's advocate, we could look at the manufacturer side of it, and they could say, hey, it costs a lot of money to do that. The suppliers may not be able to do it without specialized equipment they no longer have, whatever the case may be. But my counter then would be, then don't try. Because in reality, that's why I made the point earlier. In some ways, you'd be better served not even invoking it at all, and just coming up with it. That was why my worry when I was mentioning to you that other conversation I had. I said 93, they actually did a pretty good job. I think they were fairly faithfully original. 94, 95, I really had no moral objection. It looked about right, more or less, because it was chromium. It was the right design. It looked pretty close to what I remember the originals looking like. All fair. Sounds great. I knew 96 was where it was going to start getting challenging.
Yeah.
Because that's harder. You took the difficulty and you stepped it up a level. And then I go, if this turns out, again, I will reserve final judgment until I get a chance to see one in hand and actually see it be 100% right beside each other. But if you can't hit that, what chance do you have for 97?
Yeah.
97, it's like now you're going to have to add emboss. Now you've got the atomic design. The atomic refractor is the matrix type atomic refractor. Double-sided refractors. There's a lot. So if the budget won't allow you to get the previous year's right, we may as well give up. Like, just stop or skip to 98, because 98 it kind of normalized again a little bit.
Right.
It's like maybe you should just skip these two and move on to something easier or something that you might be able to do in your budget.
Well, one thing that I just thought of, I'm curious your opinions on. So like the Topps Chrome Platinum, right? So like, 2022, they made it with the 52 Topps design, but it's chromium. So it's the same design, but they're adding chrome to it. So what's your feelings on stuff like that?
I think it's okay because you're not trying, like, the thing is Topps has reached back to the 52 Topps a million times. So 1,000,001 is not really that insulting to me. Doing it in chromium, in fairness, at least by doing it in chromium, you did something different.
Mhm.
I will say I opened a box of that, and the centering was there were cards out of the pack that were like 90-10 centering.
Yeah.
Like it was borderline miscut. The quality control was really the issue with those things. But I'm cool with it because they use some old players, some current players, a little bit of mix and match. 52 Tops design is an iconic design. I get it. And they brought it back this year for the 53. So
Yep.
same thing. They did it again. It wouldn't surprise me if they make it an annual thing the way they did with Heritage in the first place. And it's like, all right, guys, if we do it in Chromium, we get to restart the clock, start at 52 again. And it's like, all right, let's go, guys. I'm ready. Jake, I am looking forward to when we get all the way up to 1987 because they've already done 1987 tributes 5,000 times.
Yep.
And then I want Heritage, Jake, to last long enough to get to 1987. And then they literally have a full set of 1987.
The thing I was just thinking about is what happens when we get all the way back up to 1996. What would that be? That would be we'd be in 20.
It's gonna take a long time.
Yeah, we I might not be here for that.
In baseball right now, we're up to 1973 or 74.
Yeah.
Like for the Heritage design, I think we're up to 73 or 74. So the problem is I was born in 83. So even to get to 83, it's like another 9 years.
Yeah.
Just to get us like, are you guys really going to go? Are you really going to go all the way to early 80s? Like, are you sure? This is what you want to like? Look, I'm here for it.
Right.
I plan to be here. I'll cackle. I'll buy a box of that crap. Sure. Why not? Like, my birth year, my design. Why not? What the hell? But I'm looking forward to the fact that even at that point, it'll probably the other little insert will probably still be 1987 because for some reason they keep obsessing over this one design and they keep it's 52 Tops and 1987 Tops. These are the two they seem to go to the well all the time on. Tops is guilty as this as anybody. But to kind of your question, look, if you want to chromize an existing design, sure. I'm more offended when you take something that actually has technology and screw it up.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's worse because then the problem is the people who remember it are then going to think less of it because you screwed it up, and the people that don't remember it won't care. But at the same time, then the design means nothing to them anyway. So then who cares? Well, you could have just gotten your graphic designer to come up with something and just done that.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Yeah. That was the fun thing. I know, like I've said it a million times, I'll say it a million and one. That was the fun thing with the 90s is like they were trying stuff, right? And some of it didn't hit, right? But like it was all creative. And like some of the stuff hit for some people and didn't hit for others, right? Like there's stuff that I'm a big fan of that some other people are like, I don't like that, which is great, because there are so many different things that they were trying. Inevitably you're going to find something, when you're ripping up a new pack, you're going to find something that really speaks to you. And I feel like that's harder to do now. It's not impossible, right? Like there's Panini basketball products that I rip that, it feels like I'm the only person that cares, like one of my favorite Panini basketball offerings, modern offerings, is Illusions. I love Illusions and Recon are two of my favorite, just talking about like from a base set perspective. Like I love their use of hollow foil. I like the design. It gives me a little bit of feel of the 90s. But it feels like if they can slap chrome onto another product, they would rather do that than actually coming up with a new design. And I always think about Hoops Premium stock. When that came out, I was like, we've jumped the shark. So.
Look, in fairness though, will you feel that way when you see Hoops Premium Diamond Edition? Because then we can have a remake of the remake.
Right.
Think about it. See, I'm a step, Jake. I've already foreseen the future.
It's funny because like I'm thinking now also like so 89 Hoops was the first NBA Hoops, and then in 1999 they had Hoops Decade, so it was an homage to the 89 design. So if they want to go with that, now they're gonna have an homage of an homage.
Yes. Jake, we discussed this last time. I have ideas, and don't worry, I can fire up the whiteboard. I've got even more ideas. We can come up with a lot of things, and somehow, some way, 1987 Topps baseball. What you need in your life, basketball wise, Jake, is 1987 Topps baseball. You need wood grain borders.
We do. And wood grain It's one of those things I always thought was exclusive to basketball, and then I learned about how prevalent the 1987 design. I was actually ripping some packs
Which
I
was an
pulled.
homage, by the way, to the 62 Tops design.
Oh, was it really?
The
Oh,
62
okay,
Tops design was
yeah,
wood grain borders. And then 25
yeah.
years later, they went back to the wood grain borders in 87. So it was Tops was homaging themselves from back then.
That's I never connected that, but you're right.
It's 25 years later to exactly.
Wow. Yeah, because I remember my uncle gave me his old collection. There's an Al K line that I'm now picturing. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think though an important point that I want to quickly make here briefly is that I think people think that a lot of these things, like this is the first time it's happened. It's like we've
Hmm.
got social media, we're going to complain about stuff more. Like I guarantee that. I understand. I do get it. But at the same time, it's like companies have screwed up before. They will screw up again. We just see it more.
Yeah.
I'll quickly touch on one that I think is pertinent. Obviously, now top slash fanatics. Again, fanatics overlords. If the check's got enough zeros on it, I will delete this. Jake and I can come to an arrangement and we'll delete this and forget this conversation ever happened. But in the meantime, criticism is warranted. So let's do it for now. What I want to say though is that obviously they're having the issue right now with the extra one of ones and things like that, right? And a lot of people are trying to get their head. I literally listened to a conversation. I won't say who, but we both know who it is. So I'll share with you after. But they were literally like, shocked. It's like, why would they have extra cards in this thing? I've seen like, what do you think backdoor copies of the 90s stuff is? They printed
Right.
more. This is 30 years ago.
Yep.
What are we even Jake, sometimes my head's about to explode when I listen to something. I'm sitting there like, why do I need to explain this to you?
Yeah.
I acknowledge, I agree that I don't think it's necessary to do a complete reprint run of stuff. But having a backup set of one of ones from a manufacturing standpoint makes a lot of sense to me. Now, having a third is weird. That's where you kind of like go, all right, let's have a look at the security footage from the supplier and like, well, what are y'all doing over there? What's going
Right.
on? But a backup copy, no, that's totally within the realm
Yeah.
of normalness. And like, say, an insert out of 100, having a couple extra copies just in case some damage. Again, well within normal. But that's the reason backdoor copies exist. When you see a full sheet of something, essential credentials, a full sheet of it that somebody buys, where did that come from? The manufacturer made it.
Right.
It existed for a reason, and it never got cut up and all that. But the point is, it existed for a reason.
Yep.
That goes back 25, 30 years.
Well, and for those who are kind of at a loss and can't believe that something like that would happen, imagine if you were that person that hit a one of one, not even of a star player, of just your favorite player, whoever that may be.
Sure.
And you're super excited, and that pack, we saw it happen in the 90s a bunch, got caught in the the crimping of the pack, so the top edge or the bottom edge is destroyed essentially.
Yeah.
Right. That's not going to feel great. But if you can connect with the manufacturer and they are like, no problem, send it in to us and they'll replace it with a copy that is in mint condition or as close to it as possible, you're going to feel better about that. And that's why they're going to have duplicate copies. So it absolutely makes sense. Yeah, a third copy, we're getting a little bit weird on that. But yeah, because like, one of my favorite sets in the 90s, an insert set, and kind of a redemption. And I think this is something that actually, again, talking to the Fanatics Overlords, might be an idea that I've ruminated on a modern way to do it. But, we could get into that offline when the check comes in, right? But so 99 2000 NBA Hoops had to build your own card. So they would insert a booklet and you could pick from 3 fronts and 3 backs, any combination you want. So there's 9 combinations of each of the players. Now they would print up to 250 copies of each combination as they got redeemed. So for certain players that were less popular, say Keith Van Horn, there aren't 250 copies of those out there. But they had produced them. They would just stamp them with a serial number as they got redeemed. So the ones that didn't get redeemed, some of them have made it out afterwards, and they actually gave them to employees, and they had different serial number stamping on them. So they utilized those, but they were all produced in some way, shape, or form. Now, a lot of the employees didn't hold on to them, all that kind of stuff. So like finding those employee copies is very, very hard to do. But yeah, there's tons of different stuff like that in the 90s. Where you have to be careful is, those pack pulled serial numbered, the star rubies and stuff like that weren't originally pack pulled, weren't originally serial number, that had that stuff added on. That's where you got to be careful in the 90s, because those things are out there, and it's not the same.
100%, yeah. But that's why, like, in the last conversation, so I had a conversation that is already on the channel with Wade Boggs fan, big player collector, extensive player collection. So this conversation will probably have about, I think it'll appear on the channel about a week from the last one, just so we give a little space between the two and everybody had a chance to listen to both sets of them. But we're having two different kind of conversations, but a lot of it touches on the same themes. And one of the points that I made with John, Wade Boggs fan, when we were having that conversation, is I said to him, I said to kind of have a little fun with it. We have a little, we take it lighthearted tone to it, but I always kind of lead with it's like I don't care. And what I mean by that is a lot of these issues don't affect my day to day collecting enjoyment. So I look at it from a very pragmatic perspective. I say like, okay, does this affect? Now, if there's a specific issue you need to deal with it or whatever the case is, then of course it's extremely important to you. Fraud is not something we would look kindly upon. But at the same time, there's some stuff we can do stuff about, and there's some stuff that's going to happen no matter what because people are people. And some of it is just a repeat of what we've already done. This portion of the conversation we're talking about now is going back, like I said, backdoor copies. A lot of these, why would somebody do that? Because there was financial incentive. There was money to be made. So there's a reason for somebody to do it. But another example of that was Topps in the early portion of their print runs. I forget the year. I think it happened in hockey, and it might happen in baseball as well, and possibly some of the other sports. But they had an estimated print run. And what happened is there were people who sued successfully because they were able to get more cards than was supposedly available in the print run. They were able to hoard more cards than what were supposed to be available.
Okay.
How could such a thing have happened? Because they made more.
Right.
It could have been a screw up, or it could have been they actually, intended to make more, and then that was what it was. But that's why I say, like, this isn't a new conversation. It's not even a new controversy. Like I said, somebody successfully sued and was compensated by proving you said there were these many copies. I have these many copies right here in a box right in front of you. I can show you. And people look right now, obviously Topps/Fanatics has their issue. Now that it's been out in the world a little bit, I can tell you, Upper Deck, the one who has the exclusive license to hockey, they came out with their Series 1 Upper Deck flagship product. It's been very well received so far, people enjoying it and everything. One of the inserts is a thing called Pop Count. And they've got different tiers. So it starts off at Pop Count 1000, which they're not serial numbered, but each one of the numbers corresponds to the actual population. So 1,000 means there's 1,000 copies. There's a 500. There's, I think, a 100, a 10, etc., all the way to Pop Count 1, which is a 1 of 1, of course. Now, here's the thing. There's one of the players from the Minnesota Wild, Kaprizov, and what happened is somebody pulled the Pop Count 1 Kaprizov. Fantastic. Hey, congratulations. Problem. On eBay, if you look, I don't know if they're still both up, but if you look, there's actually two of them.
Oh, wow.
It's a 1 of 1. There's two of them. And I can confirm, because I know one of the places where it was pulled and they got a chance to see it in person, that it is legit. So at least they can confirm that one. And the other one looks legit. In other words, this has nothing to do with Fanatics Overload. See, Fanatics Overload, you're off the hook on this one. Upper Deck is having the same problem. Not on the scale. It's not like a widespread issue to the same degree, but guess what? But here's the thing. Here's the point that I'm making with this, Jake. How could this happen? Well, Upper Deck uses suppliers too. The Fanatics Overlords use suppliers too. Wouldn't people love to know? And I've repeated it many times. I don't know why it's not common knowledge in this. They use the same suppliers, right?
Right.
So if they can screw up on one, why couldn't they screw up on the other? We've seen cases where somebody opens a pack of something and gets a card from the other manufacturer in the pack of this one. How that? Because it's made in the same factory.
Yeah.
So of course they can screw it up. It happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, one of the manufacturers is fairly close to where I am. And they also make, playing cards, right? So like, stuff that you play poker with, right? Mm-hmm. So imagine like how many mistakes are made with those, and those aren't as collectible, but there are some playing card decks that get pretty pricey. And I'm sure that if you got something that was dinged from the manufacturer and you're a very serious, pinochle player, probably not gonna be too thrilled.
I didn't have pinochle on the bingo card. Good job by you. I wasn't expecting that one today. But I think my key point that I'm making, though, is I'm not trying to excuse the error. I'm simply pointing out that it is not inconceivable that in this type of environment where this is what's going on, that type of mistake could totally be made. Now, right. The solution would be for the manufacturers to really take control of their own manufacturer install their own quality assurance. But here's the problem. That costs money.
Right.
And almost all these problems, including why can't we get the technology right when we could do it 30 years ago? Answer, money.
Yeah, and like talking to Jean from Arena Design, she's talked, and actually I just had John and Josh from 90s Auctions on, and they were talking about one of the conversations that they had with her. She was sharing the 90s Z Force. There was an insert set called Rave Review. Now, if you look, and I don't have the penny with me, but it's got like a copper hollow foil pattern on it, really cool looking. But on the edges there are these like black bars that are kind of like almost like triangles, and it looks like an area that you would expect to be die cut out. And she confirmed that the plan of the design was to die cut those black portions out, so you can imagine what they would look like, but they didn't do it because of cost constraints and how they wanted to pack that stuff out. So she's admitted there are a lot of technologies and foils and stuff that they've used on insert sets that were very cost prohibitive to reinvent or redo now. Because she's done some of the hockey releases with Upper Deck, and she worked on the Metal Universe. So like the foil that they use for PMGs in Metal Universe is not anywhere close to the same as what they used in the 90s, and that's because of cost. So like, and we see Fleer Skybox did a lot of really cool stuff with a lot of really innovative designs. They went bankrupt.
Yeah.
And I think Upper Deck doesn't want to have that same fate. And not saying it's all just because of pushing the envelope with designs and cost of those, but that definitely was a factor. So
yeah. All I'll add is that, and I completely agree. All I'll add is that I know I've had Billy Cilio, who works at Upper Deck, and his job is to come up with the concepts that become the sets. And one of the realities is that no, the budget for this set is part of right off the top. It's you have this budget. Obviously, they're never going to reveal the numbers. That's on them. But the thing is, they told flat out, you have this budget to build this set. So whatever you decide to do, you want to put more autographs in it, that's going to cost more money. Include that in your budget. You want to use more wacky technologies. Cool. If we got to do something special in custom order, that's coming out of your budget. So in order to accomplish whatever it is you think you're going to accomplish at the pack price, box price, whatever you're shooting for, this is your budget to do that. Come back to me with results. And then all of a sudden, so there's almost always a compromise. There's something that was a choice, something that was made. Maybe you were going to do a couple more inserts. You ran out of money to do that. So either I can give you 2 more inserts or I can enhance this, and then that'll fit within the budget. And that's how we'll do it. So that's why you'll notice with Upper Deck products, game used and autographs are becoming tougher to pull on some of these sets. That's not an accident, because you're saying like, look, we'll get a certain amount. We'll make them tougher to pull. Hopefully that makes the secondary market happy, because tougher pull, more money for the pull, but you're not getting one per box all of a sudden. And then the people complain, it's like, why didn't I get my hit? My game. You mean the game use memorabilia piece is $5? Y'all didn't care about it when you got it one per box. And then all of a sudden we took it away and made it easy. And I'm not going to excuse anything, but I'm just pointing out that is a reality. And you made the point though. A lot of these innovative companies, they all went out of business.
Yeah.
They're all gone.
Yep.
The IP is owned today by somebody else that wasn't the original one, and they're still in business because they've minded that budget. So I don't know. It's unfortunate, because obviously for us, we look at it in a certain way. Maybe having collected and been around in the 90s period, unfortunately, it kind of spoils us. That's why I led with that idea of, in a certain way, I don't want you to try to retread the old path, because it's like, the problem is you can't do it justice. I'm not even blaming you. I'm just saying you can't. So then don't. Come up with whatever version of it you can do based on what you have available today.
100%.
Go with that.
Yeah, and like I want to see innovation, right? I want to see new technologies and new. It doesn't have to be at the same rate that we saw in the 90s, but it would be fun if, like there was an insert set, and I can't remember the name of it, that Gene had shared from this year's Fleer Ultra. It's got like some blue foil, and I was like, that's really cool, and that's something new and creative, and it's fun to see a few of those. But yeah, let's mind the budget, not to go too crazy. Let's do something that's sustainable, but still kind of trying out some new stuff.
No, I think it's fair. And like I said, we will get those homages. What's going to be funny is one of the categories that I'm in is the wrestling cards, and Upper Deck has been doing AEW. And what happens is this year they introduced AEW Metal. And what happens is because it's Metal Universe, we bring in a bunch of you've got a the Skybox Premium. You've got a red ruby version of it. Sounds familiar. But they've already done the the art for the next year's. And one of the ones they brought in, and I'll show the card since now I'm going to transition over to their discussion. We already talked about and showed it. They're going to have these in that one next year. Now, the cut above is a fantastic set. And this will kind of transition us over into talking a little bit about football and some of these sets that transition over that were multiple sports. So folks that have seen the cut above, they're die cut. They got a cool design there that plays with the light a little bit, which is great. So that's fantastic. They're going to do this in AEW Metal for next year.
Okay.
Now, here's the thing. I've got one, so I'm going to be able to put them side by side and say, all right, how close did you get?
Right.
And again, that's what happens when you go into this well. You court the danger of being able to do like, all right, did you do it right? Did you?
Right.
So we're going to have to see. We'll see if our friends at Upper Deck pulled it off, but it's dangerous to go into those waters because we can do comparison.
Yeah. And I actually did one recently in a video on my channel where I was showing a football PMG Red compared to the retro version. It was a basketball one. And on the video, I'm not sure that you can see the differences very clearly. But if you've seen them in hand, like one is not like the other. They're just not. And that's definitely the danger. Like so here's one I can think of for basketball. They made a retro, the Maximum Metal. So here's a Charles Barkley. They made retro collegiate version. So I have the penny. It's not the same as this, right? Like the shine of the foil is not the same. Like there's a dimensionality to the 95 design that's just not like, it's very 2D kind of flat on the retro, so it's just like, I have the penny. Penny's my PC guy. Penny wasn't in the 95 metal set. But do I really want, he's in his college jersey. The design's just not, I think I'd rather just keep the Charles Barkley and just know that there's not a penny.
Okay.
Rather than have this penny that's just like not quite it.
Oh, I think that's fair. And I've made the point before. You can, if you want to try, the card that didn't exist, whatever, you can do it, but you do have to be careful. So I'll use, this isn't really a 90s card, but it's conceptually. In 2019 in football, they did contenders, but they've done retro contenders based on the 90s version. So they do have a Favre with him in an Atlanta Falcons uniform, which, of course, is a card that didn't exist in the first place, but it's a decent enough design. I'd like it to be on card, but at the same time, it's decent. But what they did is they kept it limited. The print run on these is 20. So it's tough enough that it's at least a cool idea. I can live with it. Once in a while, if you're going to make them tough to pull, fine. You want to have some fun with it. Again, this is a card that doesn't exist. So we got nothing real to compare it to other than the original. But again, Favre was already a veteran long past the time this came out. Borrowing the 98 design, it's like, well, Favre was already almost 10 years into his career by that point.
Right.
So, it wouldn't have been an issue for him. But then the problem is you go back to the original. So here's another one that a Flair showcase. So you got the hot hands. So these are fun and not super crazy expensive, but we're die cutting them. And some of these look really good. Now, I want to play into this side of the conversation a little bit. 90s B-ball cards, obviously you're lean, but you're wearing the Packer jersey. So let's lean into that a little bit. Two parts to this question. First part of the question. There's a lot of carryover with different ones. I showed a couple of designs that have been borrowed in other sports as well. Like the cut above is in at least 3 sports for sure. But is there one example of an insert or parallel? So I'll open it up to you either way. That is in multiple of those where maybe you have a preference with the way one of them was done over the other, or did they keep them pretty consistent? Do you have an example of that?
Yeah. So, and I'll actually bring up the football example. So different years, but the same design, right? So for basketball, we're talking 96, and football and baseball is 97, but it was the EX2000 essential credentials, right? So like the football version, this is Stan Humphries, if anybody's, looking and can't really tell.
Yeah. I want to zoom in on that one. So hang tight for one sec, because I love the specific type of foil they use for that.
Exactly. The football foil is gorgeous. And these were also numbered to just 100 copies.
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
Now the basketball version, I don't have the penny at fingertips, but is more of like, it's still silver, but it's more of like a radial type of hollow foil. Those are numbered to 499. Gotcha. and then baseball had two versions, and one was just kind of a flat silver.
Mhm.
And I think those were numbered to 499. I'm stretching my knowledge here, but then they also had the essential credentials, which had it's actually like this star rubies,
Mhm.
which is a kind of subtle kind of star pattern on a
Mhm.
silver background. So like they used the same type of design, like with the square cutout and kind of like the sky in the background for all three sports, but the hollow foil was different. And I love the basketball, but the football really stands out to me as the best version of that. And it's also one that I kind of have sour grapes over because Favre showed up on eBay.
Mhm.
If I remember correctly, it was raw, and I just so happened I was sitting with my daughter, and I was just scrolling through eBay while we're watching, Fancy Nancy or something on TV, and I saw a Favre, and I think it was like selling for like $100 bin.
Mhm.
And I hit bin because I'm just like $100. Like this seems too good to be true, so I'll risk $100 to see if what's going on. And then it said, "Sorry, the item's out of stock." And I'm like, "Out of stock? What? Like this is bizarre."
Mhm.
Somebody else was doing the same thing as me and hit bin just a split second before me. So I was
Right.
DMing the seller to try
Mhm.
to figure out what had happened. So I showed my daughter was looking at my screen. She's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And she saw the card. She's like, "That's really pretty, Daddy. Are you getting that card for me?" I was like, "I'm trying to." So I tried to play on the seller's heartstrings and be like, my daughter is really excited, da 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 da. And then when he told me like somebody else had bought it, I'm not going to be that person to be like, well, will you sell it to me for $20 more? Because
Mhm.
that's not $100 card, right?
Sure.
It's probably not a $500 card, right? So whichever one of us hit bin first was going to get a heck of a steal. It would have been a PC
Mhm.
card for me, and I don't know, if the person who ended up getting it. So anyway, that's all the story of me having sour grapes on the Favre copy of that. So I have a
Mhm.
Stan Humphries as a stand-in, and I'll probably I don't think I'll ever get the Favre, to be completely honest, but
Mhm.
that's all right.
No, that's fair. That's fair. And I agree with it about that specific type of foil with the little stars in it. And actually, I don't know if I'll do one this year, but in the past, I've done my favorite Medano cards in my collection
Mm,
or my favorite pickups of the year. I do stuff like that. But there's a Six Sense Wizards is, I want to say 97, 98 Six Sense Wizards from Upper Deck. And the thing is, the foil, the piece they put in there is using that star type design on it. So it's been used by different companies. The different
yep.
so the key is, and this is part of the conversation I talk about with the current situation. Look, a lot of them are using the same ideas. Even in the '90s, it's like I literally talked about the exact same foil, that same kind of design and everything, but they came up with a different design and implemented a certain way. The
Right.
essential credential you're showing implemented it a different way, and you can do that. That's fine. It's not the end of the world. It's just how you decide to employ it and where you decide to employ it. If you want to be judicious about it, as long as you don't run it into the ground, there's an
Hmm.
opportunity there to do that. Now, sometimes the companies I think get a little spiteful, and that's kind of funny. One of the things that happened with that AEW when they came out with the first year product, one of the parallels of it, I think they called it. I think it was just the Dynamite parallel. And what happens is if you look at the Dynamite parallel and you look at it, and somebody pays close attention to it, and I confirmed it with my friend from Upper Deck, and in the conversation, he goes, "Yeah." It's like, "Oh yeah, it's the kaboom foil. We use the kaboom foil
Yeah.
for the parallel of it." It's like, but it's a lot easier to pull, obviously, than a kaboom. But it's still not a easy parallel. But it's like, look, if you look at it, it's like, yeah, we have access to the exact same foils.
Right.
It's the same thing.
Well, and like the kaboom foil is very similar to this football
Yeah,
credentials, right? Like this is almost like a micro sized version of, I'm thinking of Luca's rookie year. I think is a very similar, but multiple starburst all over. Um, yeah, so it's like these a lot of these aren't 100% novel ideas, but sometimes it's a novel application of the
sure.
idea.
Yeah,
Like for example, like we love for basketball collecting talking about the 97 game jerseys from Upper Deck. They're the
yeah,
first ever basketball game jerseys, which is not exactly true because Press Pass had actually done it in 96.
mhm.
And I believe the first ever memorabilia pieces to get inserted into a card was also by Press Pass, but not in any of the sports we've talked about. I think it was actually racing that they had a piece of a
Yeah. I think there
tire.
was. That's right. I think it was NASCAR or something like that, and it was, yeah, it was a racing card.
Yeah.
that had it. First memorabilia piece.
Yeah, so it's like you take that idea from that Press Pass had, great idea, then Press Pass put a jersey, and then Upper Deck. I think the first professional sports league licensed yada yada yada, I think was actually the football jerseys in '96 Upper Deck. I might be wrong on the year, but yeah. So it's
Mhm.
just like you're taking an idea, you're making it different, you're making it better, you're bringing along steps of the process to improve upon it. And then at some point we we started getting into the early 2000s when Upper Deck and every other company was just slapping any material that they could find into any card. And now we're at the point where what is it, the first Stitch cards that's being produced now from the first mass produced jersey of a player. So
Fantastic idea. Wow.
yeah.
Chef's kiss. There's my bone to you. There's my bridge fanatics. I'll give you that one. Sure. Sounds great. But here's the thing. I'll go back. I'll defer back to my previous editors. Like, I don't care. Go ahead. What it comes down to is, as a collector, I can make a choice and say, well, that's stupid. I'm not interested. So I have that. Like, nobody said I have to chase it and be. No, I don't have to be interested at all. I can think it's really dumb. But I will defer to Carvin Chung, because I've had him on the channel in the past and had a conversation about this and the whole manufactured patches, but also the idea of not from a specific game or whatever,
Hmm.
those kind of things. And I'm paraphrasing, but his point was, for some of these cards, he kind of favors the idea. And if he's changed his stance, we can, I'll be happy to be corrected. But at the time we had the discussion on the channel, his stance at the time, paraphrasing, was that it's the aesthetic that for him is the most interesting. If applied well, yeah, not from any specific game use, whatever, but they use the cool patch piece with aesthetically looks good on the card, whatever. Of course, the game use might be more interesting, but most people don't know the difference.
Hmm.
And what's happened over time is that Panini's proven this. The not from any specific game use or event or whatever works well enough. So I guess, question, how is that really that much different from the first mass produced whatever?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I think especially when you start getting into engineered patches, it's
Yeah.
really, you're really splitting hairs at that. And full disclosure, I have an engineered patch booklet
Mhm.
from, I think it was '07 Topps Letterman of Carlos Boozer.
Mhm.
And it's the whole nameplate. It's a whole booklet that has an engineered patch of each letter of his last name.
Mhm.
And I posted it on my Instagram, and somebody actually like reached out to me, and it says on each panel, it says basically, this is not a real game use patch, this is an engineered patch. Even with me zooming into that and everything, like somebody reached out to me that's a booster collector, is like, hey, can I buy that from you? I've never seen a game use patch like that. And it says, that's because there isn't one.
Yeah,
It doesn't exist.
exactly.
And it's a cool piece. Like, I enjoy it. And when I bought it, back in '07, there were not a lot of pictures on the eBay listing. This was when, you had to pay per picture.
Mhm.
So I looked at it. I didn't know the difference between
Mhm.
that and the game used or whatever until I got it and I looked at it. Um, so it looks cool, but yeah, that card could have been cut up from a a patch that came off of a jersey on a rack. I wouldn't have known the difference.
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of it comes down to how much, even for the game use pieces, a lot of it comes down, well, okay, how much do you trust that they put the right piece from the right jersey in the right thing?
Yeah.
Because you're not there, you don't know. So that was always a possibility, always a factor that we have to at least take into account. But going beyond that to the actual aesthetic of it, well, okay, what if you decide to play with that concept, what you just talked about? Okay, so you do like a nameplate kind of thing from a manufactured whatever, not from any specific game use event, whatever. Okay, but what if the player signs it?
Mm.
Okay, so yeah, it's a fake patch, but they signed it. So, okay, as a collector, I may still have interest in the autograph piece because, in effect, it's an autograph piece. I treat it as a different looking autograph piece,
Hmm.
but at the end of the day, it's an autograph, right?
Yeah. No, 100%. I have a card in my collection that I loved as a kid. This is really obscure, but the '97, it's the Thunder Wheels game ball.
Okay.
And it was a collegiate set. I have the Antonio Daniels, so he's in a bowling green uniform, and I think there's a Tim Duncan. There might be a Tracy McGrady, but anyway, the whole idea of this is as the name implies, the game ball insert set, it has a massive piece of a basketball behind it. Now, I've always thought about getting another copy of the card and kind of taking it apart and seeing, is it an actual piece of a basketball, all that kind of stuff. But the name implies that it's a game used ball, right? But it
Mhm.
could be a game used ball from a third grade rec league, right?
Mm.
It could be not even a real ball. Like I would have no, I don't know. And the card doesn't make any definitive statement on, you know, what the material is or where it came from or anything like that, right? It's just literally the name of the insert set is Game Ball, so who knows.
Mhm.
But regardless, I still love that card. I loved it then because it just looks cool, right? And the
Sure.
idea of it might be a massive piece of a ball is kind of cool, right? Imagine how big of a piece, how many balls you'd have to cut up to you know make as many. I think there were 250 in the print run, right? You weren't going to use one ball to make all 250. That's for sure. So yeah, it's just sometimes you can do stuff like that and use materials that are just aesthetically pleasing. And I think as long as people aren't being sold a bill of goods, it's okay, right? Everything has its marketplace, you know. But it would be problematic if, you know, Fanatics was saying those first stitch cards, those first stitch patches were game used, right?
Sure.
That would be a problem. But they're not doing that.
Sure. No, that's fair. Now let me throw a little wrinkle at it, since you kind of invoked and brought it up, and it was that was part of the carving conversation too. Like I said, in the same vein, we had a very short conversation. I think it was like 5 or 6 hours. Very short conversation. So anyway, in the course of that, he brought up one other nuance that kind of plays into exactly what you're talking about, which is to say, okay, so let's say, you know, a collector holds the game used in the ultimate esteem. They really insist on the game used. Fair enough. Question: if the back of of the card says game used, but the jersey is from a charity game,
Mm.
a preseason game, the person actually wore it and played in said game.
Hmm.
How far do we stretch the definition of game?
Yeah.
Because a charity game is a game. If they put on the uniform, played, you know, played in the basketball court, skated on the ice, scored a goal, did whatever, but it's a charity game.
Hmm.
I didn't say official league game or playoff game, or I said it is game worn. The person put it on and played a game. How far can we stretch that? Because a game is a game.
Right. Well, is a scrimmage and a practice a game? You know, like
That's a question.
and the other thing too is, you know, the verbiage on the back of the card you could get pretty vague with and say like
Yeah.
this is a patch from a, it might not, you could have a scenario where it is a game used patch, a game used swatch, but not worn by that player.
Yeah.
And like this actually makes me think, so somebody was asking me, I was talking about the 97 game jerseys, upper deck game jerseys basketball.
Mhm.
They were saying, oh, I wish Shaq was in that set. So I was saying to them, like, I don't know anything definitively, but I would guess that the reason that Shaq is not in the 97 Upper Deck game jersey set is because Shaq joined the Lakers in 96.
Mhm.
So I would imagine that the time frame as far as when Upper Deck had to obtain the materials to get them cut up and put them into the cards and then pack those out was a pretty tight time window. And I don't think that they would have enough time in less than, you know, a few months to get a Shaq Lakers jersey. But you could have taken a Nick Van Exel Lakers jersey, cut that up, and said, "Hey, it's game worn," right?
Mhm.
Theoretically, I think that at
Yeah.
that point, Upper Deck was being pretty strict with their practices, but that's an assumption as well, right?
Yeah. I think over time, it just, the only reason I bring it up that way, because it was a nuance that he broached, which I think was fair, is that early on, they were explicit. There were even times where some of the manufacturers would show you a picture of the jersey,
Hmm.
presumably this came from, and they could even go down to the game. Like they would be very specific. But then as time went on, we became more and more vague and more vague and more vague. And at a certain point, like if you really just want a game used, like there's a lot of ways we can get around phrasing it in such a way where we can still meet your requirement and still keep our costs relatively down. The example that you gave being one of them. But like I said, also, if we expand the definition of game, it becomes a little easier to source those jerseys, and it could even be worn by the person in question. We could still meet that requirement for you. And we'll see. Like
Yeah.
if Fanatics has the relationship with leagues, which it does have as part of this whole deal. Look. What if it became a thing where people became so obsessed with the idea, like we have to bring it back to game use, and Fanatics like, okay, fine, 4 quarters in a basketball game. Hey guys, swap out your jerseys at each quarter. You're going to wear 4 jerseys a game.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. This is sweaty anyway. Boom. Swap it out. Boom. Swap it out. Boom. So you're getting 4 jerseys a game. You play 80, 81, 82 games.
82 typically, unless there's some other issues.
You're talking 300 jerseys.
Yep.
300 game used jerseys. Is that enough?
Right.
Seems like that'd be enough to take care of most of your needs. By the way, they'd all be game used.
Right.
And you can even say game used in an official NBA game. I'm not even counting preseason. There you go. I solved the problem.
Playoffs.
Plenty of jerseys. No problem.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's funny too, because like Panini, I feel like was the first company that was really getting a bad rap on the player worn, that, infamous picture of, Mark Ingram walking around with like 12 jerseys on. But they also, so like I have a jersey card of Dwayne Wade that was a specific holiday release, right? I think it was in one of their holiday products, that the jersey piece was used in the Christmas Day game the prior year, right? And there's a whole set where like all the players that played on Christmas Day, there's a whole bunch of them, so like Panini has gone to the extreme of giving people game worn materials with a specific game that they have been tied to. I don't think that those cards are terribly popular or terribly valuable. But the National Treasures player worn jersey patch cards that we know weren't in a game, we think were maybe worn by the player at an event, are very valuable, very desirable, very sought after, right? So it's like I wouldn't be surprised if a company like Panini were like looking at the market data and saying, well, like we hear you guys saying that you want game used and you want to know more information, but the market data is telling us you really don't care that much. I wouldn't fault them for looking at the data and surmising that.
Well, that's always been kind of my contention, and I think sometimes the collectors get mad at me because I go like, but the problem is your actions are telling me you don't actually care as much as you say you do. It's the same thing, though. Like I said, I'm not going to go down the content rabbit hole. I already mentioned I may touch on it here and there, but it goes back to the conversation we had last time where I said, you say you want collector-oriented content, but what are you clicking on? What are you actually viewing? Because we can see the view counts. And the view count says you want, I spent $50,000 at this card show. You want, top 5, whatever. Even if it's just to jeer at the person who makes it. Even if it's you actually don't want to hear what they have to say, you want to make fun of it, you're still watching it though.
Yep.
The person who's actually sharing, all right, let me explain this thing about the collection, this thing. Yeah, it'll get some views, it'll get some interest, but look at the scales, look at the levels. It's like, which one do you actually care? Oh, no one cares about breaking. Pac-Man gets a lot of views breaking stuff. It's like, oh, but Pac-Man gets this, but you're still watching it. Like, I don't know what to tell you. He doesn't get the free stuff from the manufacturer if you're not watching it. It's a chicken or the egg situation. Right. You have some culpability in the situation. You're partially to blame.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing is like, we tell people when it comes to like buying cards, like vote with your wallet. Yeah. And I've said the same thing with content. You vote with your eyeballs. You vote with your attention. And I've kind of played with titles of videos on my own channel, and like when I think there's a video that I had like in the last year where I was like, I took $100 risk on this, lot or whatever, right?
Okay.
The views on that were pretty good because people are like, did he waste $100, right? Like I imagine there's a lot of people that are like I can look at the analytics. There's a lot of first-time viewers. There's a lot of people who are not subscribed to the channel, right? Because they're probably seeing that and like, let's see if he won or lost. But when I go and say, hey, I'm going to open up this pack of, 95 Fleer, not as many people might click on that. And I've played with also like, the top 10 cards in my collection, stuff like that. Those videos get a ton of, so like you can play with the words and people will click on stuff that sounds a little bit more sensational. So if you want kind of the ho-hum collector content, but you're not clicking on it, then, it's no surprise that people who are after more clicks and more views and more subs and all those vanity metrics go for the stuff that gets them the clicks, that get them the vanity metrics, right? And it's like people like you and I, we make videos because we like to. It's fun for us. It's a creative expression. We like sharing our, for a multitude of reasons. If this video gets 5 views, I don't think you or I feel as though it's a waste of our time, right? Like,
No.
the enjoyment is us having this conversation. It's not the views. But if it gets 5 million views, that's cool too. But for some people, if it got 5 views, it's a failure, right? It's a waste of their time. It's different people have different reasons for it, but the people clicking on stuff and saying, "Oh, this isn't the content that I want to see. Make the content I want to see." Well, click on the content you want to see then.
Yeah, no, it's fair. And like, I've had fun because I did once upon a time, and I was joking with Jake before we started recording, where I said one of my favorite videos. I joked with it in the past. I call it my magnum opus. One of my favorite things was doing a reaction video to, and it's on the channel. People have seen it. Is the reaction where I did where Chris Hoge and Christina from Card Ladder were doing the interview with Dakota Sports Card Anonymous, who I've become good friends with, who I chat with regularly. He did an interview because at the time they had some contentious comments about content, and they were talking about it. Like I said, it was one of my more popular videos. And by the way, my favorite part about it, kind of playing into what Jake's saying, people vote with their eyeballs and with their wallet, so to speak. But here's the thing. So in the video, I'm poking fun at a lot of the things that he's saying because I disagree with him. I genuinely disagree with him. I disagree with him so much that in the first part of the 2 videos, which was the more viewed of the 2, I literally spent an inordinate amount of time going through it, dissecting the first 35 or 40 minutes of a 1-hour conversation. It took me an hour and 20 minutes to dissect 30 minutes. It actually took me longer than the original piece of content, but lots of people watched it. And some people disagreed with me, and other people agreed with me totally. And a lot of people were just highly entertained. So it's like, so depending on your perspective, you can be like, "Oh, that's drama." It's like, no, it's not. I watched this thing and I disagreed with some of the points, and I made my counterpoints to it. You don't have to agree with my counterpoints. That was literally the point of the discussion. I was like, no, I'm saying why I don't agree. But I actually made a piece of content longer than the original, reacting to the original, and then people watch that. And I know not only from the views, but I know from the watch time that people who watched it spent a fair bit of time actually sitting there watching it, either because they disagreed or because they were entertained or because they agreed, but they watched it anyway.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I mean, from the perspective of, people saying, "Oh, that's drama," you could make a lot of different topics about sports cards dramatic, make them more drama based, right? Like, I made a video talking about the big 4 grading companies, right? And kind of talking through like the price points and like where I would use them and, me personally, right? Like, and I took some shots at them. Like, I talked about stuff that I didn't like about them. Somebody could say, "Well, this is drama," right? I'm not, speaking, you know, hypercritically, but I'm speaking my mind about the companies. For some people that could be too dramatic. And I made a video on a bulk submitter that I had used multiple times, and each time I had a bad experience, right? 3 strikes you're out type of thing. It got progressively worse, and I made a video because, like, I have videos talking about using them as a bulk submitter on my channel, and having not had a good experience with them, I think it would be disingenuous for me to just have the videos out there where essentially I'm endorsing them by saying that I'm using them, to not tell people like, yeah, I'm not using them and this is the reason why. Now, I'm not doing it to try to torpedo their business or anything like that, right? But the quote unquote negative group of content creators didn't pick up on that, right? Nobody, which is fine. I'm actually happy they didn't, right? And if other people had great positive reactions with that bulk submitter, that's great too. I'm not telling anybody what to do. But people could say that was drama for me, right? I don't think a lot of people look at my channel and say that I have a drama channel, right? But there's stuff that, depending on your perspective, depending on your lens, you could say was drama. So
I think it's fair. I think it is fair game as a consumer of either a product or content to be able to speak your experience on it. Um, I think the key, though, and this is kind of the point that I make with it as well, is that if it was a regular occurrence and I was constantly doing the. I joked about it being my magnum opus because honestly, I had a lot of fun doing it. And in retrospect, watching it back later, it's like, no, I really enjoyed that. Like I had a lot of, to be blunt, I had a lot of fun with it. And it became clear for me after a while that other people enjoyed it too, which is fantastic. I think that was great. So they got some entertainment. Even if they didn't agree with my point, they at least were entertained with what they were getting out of it. And if they agree with my point, even better. Fantastic. I was able to convince some people and other people were not convinced, and that was fine. But it's not a regular occurrence that I'll do that all the time. It's once in a blue moon. If it strikes the right chord with me and it's something I think I can offer some kind of an opinion, then it's great. But if that's all you're doing, then I think that's one type of channel. And then I like to have a little bit of a variety in it. Now, what's funny, one thing that has changed for me is there was a time where I would make the point about voting with your eyeballs, like you say, and then I would try to dissuade people to be like, well, if you don't like this, then stop watching it. And then it became clear, like, it doesn't matter what you say. Some people are going to watch it anyway. So I've actually changed my stance. I'm like, you know what? If you like it, enjoy it. I don't have to agree with it. But if I don't like it, I'm just not going to watch it. I'm not going to engage with it negatively. I'm not going to leave a mean comment. I'm not going to hit thumbs down. I'm literally going to be like, this isn't for me. I'll move on. So, but if you're enjoying it, fantastic. Have a good time. And if you enjoy what I'm doing, great. Then I appreciate you letting me know. But otherwise, it's like, no, watch whatever the hell you want. Like I'm done trying to tell you what to watch because there's stuff that I don't think should get the airtime that it does. But at the same time, people watch it. So you know what? Fine. Y'all win. Do it. Have a good time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because like, especially like on YouTube, the YouTube algorithm is going to serve you videos that it thinks that you're going to want to watch.
Yes.
So if there's a certain content creator that you don't want to watch, I remember, you had mentioned Jeff Wilson, like his videos were getting pumped to me constantly, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I don't want to watch them and they keep getting pumped to me, after a while, the algorithm is going to pick up on that and be like, hey, this person's not watching this channel. And his videos don't get recommended to me anymore. But if they keep getting recommended to you day after day after day, it's because you're watching them, right? It's because you're engaging with that stuff. So, it's hard for me to sit there and hear people complain about somebody's content that they're watching, right? Like, it's like, and I always talk about this, like the Kardashians, right? I don't like that show. I don't watch that show, right? If my wife is watching the show, I'm not. I'm gonna watch something on my on my phone, right? But if I was to sit there and watch the Kardashians and then complain about, hey, did you see what this person did on the Kardashians yesterday? Like, do I really dislike watching it then?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
I think it's fair. Now, I actually will share a tip that I've shared in the past that I think will be helpful for some folks if they want to. The key isn't to be positive or negative on it. I just say I leave it to you to make your own. That's why I say my stance changed from the perspective that I'm no longer going to try to convince you to either watch or not watch. I can make recommendations of channels I think are good or videos that I think are good. That I may still take time to do from time to time, but I'm not going to make any negative recommendations. Like, you know what? Fine. You're enjoying it. Watch it. Have a good time. I will make one suggestion though, and this is something I've shared in the past, but I'll share it again. In your YouTube feed, in your main like home feed, where you see all those videos and everything, and this works on mobile and desktop. So I've actually shown it to people before, and they're like, "You can do that? You actually can." So when you see all those different things, if you put your mouse or your finger over, there's the little 3 dots happening over on the side. If you check there, you can do some stuff, including add it to your watch later and all that. At the bottom, don't recommend channel. There's the not interested, and then there's the don't recommend channel. If you use the don't recommend channel, you've literally told YouTube, don't feed me this channel again.
It's a great point.
That's a tip. Like pro tip right there. If you genuinely are at the stage where you just don't want to see it anymore at all, take it off your feed. That button will literally remove it. I promise you, any ones that I've ever used that for, it doesn't come up in my feed.
Yeah.
So I offer it to you, to those of you who want to curate your own experience a little bit. That's a tip right there. And then after that, please don't complain to me that you're getting that video anymore. Like I don't care. I'm sorry. I've literally told you how to avoid it. So that is I can do no more to help you.
There you go. Yeah, that's a great pro tip.
Yeah. So and YouTube gives us that feature. For the most part, I will exercise it only once in a blue moon, but it is there for you if you want to use it. Otherwise, YouTube will try to feed you the stuff. So let me touch on, like I said, I wanted to put a little bit of focus still on the cards. We talked about ones that carry over some of these different sports.
Mhm.
Now, question for you. Let's touch on our boy Favre here for a minute, because like I said, he's got a ton for the 90s stuff. And
Yep.
he's in so many sets because he was a 3-time MVP, and obviously that made him won a Super Bowl, 3-time MVP, got the 2 Super Bowls. That means he's going to be in a ton of sets relative to a lot of other players because he was at the top of the game at that time. There's just so much stuff, and you've got some nice ones that you've been able to add to your collection. Where on the hierarchy though of the different players? You got Penny, you've got different 90s cards, you've got some examples that you pull from some of the other ones. So when you're out there and there's different options in front of you, how do you pick and choose what gets priority? All things being equal.
Yeah, so Favre for me is very low on the list.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, when I'm thinking through my hierarchy, Penny's top. Penny,
Of course.
I should say, let me put some caveats to that. Penny playing days Magic uniform is top of the list, right?
Yeah.
And
Top of the pyramid.
yes, exactly. And when we go through playing days Magic uniform, there was a small sliver of time where he had the non-pinstripe jersey, right? The new Magic jersey. Those ones are kind of like a half step below the pinstripe jersey, right? Um, but it's not to say that I don't get any of Penny Sun stuff. I do. It's just a lower priority. And then like of the Sun stuff, I like the stuff where he's in what I call the Charles Barkley jersey, right? So that first year he was with the Suns.
Sure.
I prefer that over the more modern. But then he's also got a few cards with the Knicks and the Heat that I enjoy some of those. But those are another step down. And then you get into the more modern stuff, the post-playing days, which again, those are a further step down on the hierarchy. I enjoy some of them. I have some in my collection, but not something I put a lot of time or effort into searching for. Those are more so things that I'll stumble upon, if I happen to just see them in an eBay search, they pop up, or if I'm at a show and it's like a dollar box find, right? I'll grab stuff like that. Then next would be Allen Iverson, again, playing days 76ers. Very close to him would be Kevin Garnett, playing days Timberwolves. And then we get a little bit more obscure. So then Michael Finley, playing days with the Suns or the Mavericks.
Okay.
Kind of right along the same lines, you've got Vince Carter, playing days Raptors.
Okay.
Then a little bit below them, that's when you start getting into the Favre, playing days Packers, and Baron Davis, playing days Hornets, and Lamar Odom, playing days Clippers or Lakers. And then after that, you start getting into even more obscure stuff. Like I struggle with where I have like my Mason Crosby PC in that list, right? Like Mason Crosby, I pay more attention to I have a very specific niche of Mason Crosby cards that I go after, which is really, he was in 1 year of Prism. I go after his Prism parallels. There's really only 3 that I need right now. I need the black finite 1 of 1. Good luck finding one. I need the green shimmer, which I think is out of 5. And then there's one other that I'm drawing a blank on. But because that's such a small list, I'm checking that eBay save search like almost daily, because it's a really quick one to check. Is there anything new? Yes or no? If it's new, okay. What is it? So that one I think I pay more attention to than I do to Favre. But it's hard for me to say which one I prioritize. Favre, I also we talked last time about not a great person, right?
So not a swell fella.
Yeah, not a swell fella. Yeah, exactly. So there's also kind of a little bit of that plays in there. Like he's got some great cards. I have some great memories, but there's that other thing. So where there's a great card that's brings back great memories of Reggie White, or if they're in the same set. I love getting so here's a fun one that I actually was able to pull on the channel. There's this one where it's teammates, where there's a Favre and a Reggie White, and they actually fit together if you put those die cuts
very
together.
cool. Nice. Yeah.
So that's nice to be able to have both. You got kind of like the yin and the yang almost, right? Offense and defense, good guy, not as great guy, alive, not alive, right? There's a lot of stuff going on there. But yeah, so there's some stuff some of the finest refractors, right? I like getting the Reggie Whites, and they tend to be a little bit less pricey than the Favre stuff. But like if I'm at a show, this one just happened to be one that I was walking out of a show and I saw in a dealer's booth. So it's the 97 Flair Showcase Legacy. And I was like, you know what? I think I need that. And I don't have any 97 legacies of penny. I have all of the 96 legacy pennies, but none of the 97. So I'm like, okay, I'll grab that. And if that dealer had the Favre and the Reggie White, I probably would have gone for the Reggie White over it, but that wasn't an option. So sometimes it's kind of like an impulse thing.
No, that makes sense. Absolutely. It's one of those things where, like I said, it's kind of interesting always to get like an idea. And I understood that there would be a power ranking with it. I do think, though, I think when you go through your different collecting sides, you can have a lot of fun with a lot of these things. Like I said, the 90s is and for me, it's been fun. I lived through it the first time, but it's fun for me to go back and be like, oh yeah, I remember that set, or I remember that insert, and then go through the back catalog. Since I've kind of, I've got Favre a little higher up, him being not a swell fella isn't as much of a turnoff for me. And I'll actually show a card that actually is a little bit of fun. In context of that, it's actually kind of a fun card. I'll show it off here in a minute. But one of the things is you can go in the back catalog, Planet Metal. You got stuff like that. And I'll touch on a concept here with you here in a second, because it can touch on any of the sports and it plays any of them. But I love Dufex. Dufex is a big thing that I'm a huge fan of. So stuff like this, Team Pinnacle, that's great for me. The refractors, of course, are wonderful. That's great. I showed the different ones. But the thing is, they came up with a lot of great ideas. And there's another great Dufex, the Z Team. And they did a phenomenal job on these. And they kind of shine in their own way because of the Dufex and everything. But it's not a refractor shine, but it's its own deal. It's got a different thing going for it. But I will tend to favor playing days in my side of things. But I do find some newer cards, though, sometimes that are a little bit fun. Now, I'll show this one as an example, and you'll kind of understand why when I show. There's two pictures I'll show with this one, and it'll make more sense in context. So I'm going to share it from my Instagram here. So this one is a newer card, post-playing days, 2022 Panini Elements, the Steel Signatures. So it's a great signature card. It's out of 35. But there's a specific thing about it that I like, a very specific thing about it. Now, do you happen to know what that is?
I don't. I'm familiar with the set. I have a Mason Crosby, and that's how I became familiar. But I don't know what is specific with this one. No.
Okay, so it's an on-card autograph there. It's the whole metal card. That's cool. All of these are cool things. That's great. But my favorite thing about it when I saw it, what made me say I must have it, was specifically this. So let me go to slide 2 on this picture. Look at the look on his face and his eyes. And if you really zoom in on it, you realize it's a meme. It's a meme in and of itself. And you kind of wonder, like, with the look on his face, and he's looking over to the side, what the hell is this man? He's thinking, you know what? I think they're about to catch me for the welfare fraud. Like, there's a lot of things you can envision a variety of different things and insert into the scenario. I actually have cropped it further for the Discord I'm on, and I literally crop it so it's like this. And if somebody says something, I'll literally send the picture that's just his eyes doing that, looking over at them with great judgment.
That's perfect. That is perfect.
And again, I collect for fun.
Yeah.
It didn't matter. The fact that picture, and as soon as I looked at it, I'm like, wait, what the hell is going on with his face? And I look at it, and he's literally like, he looks over, he's like, just the eyes looking over. Is like, all right, what's this man looking at? What's he thinking?
That's funny.
You can insert your own adventure.
Yeah, no, I was actually, a copy of that popped up on eBay in the last week or so, and I was looking at it. And I didn't look that closely at it, but yeah, now I'm curious what it went for. So that's a fun one.
It's like, look, Jake, but now you know. But now you know. Now if you ever see it in the wild, you can't unsee it. It's like, wait a minute.
You're right.
It's like, that's what I'm saying. Like, you take one look. It's the little things. There's a lot. He's got a ton of autographs. It's not like, oh yeah, well, you gotta have this. No, that specific one. As soon as I saw that picture, I'm like, wow, perfect. That is perfection. I need that. I need that in the collection. That's perfect. That's the kind of thing where I'll have my fun. That's how I find enjoyment in a lot of these things. Otherwise, it's all kind of same after a while. So let me ask you this. We've got different technologies because obviously we could do sets, but let's make it a little bit more interesting. What are your preferences as far as a lot of the 90s tech? We've got refractors, we got Dufex, we got die cuts. There's a lot of what are your preferences like for different ones? What are your favorites?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have a soft spot for the Dufex, but it's not really leveraged in basketball much, right? It
Sure.
was more so a pinnacle thing.
Mhm.
And I remember pulling a Mike Piazza, which I don't know if I still have that card, but yeah, I have a soft spot for that stuff, but because it's not in basketball, it's not high on the list.
Mhm.
For me, there's two technologies that I really gravitate towards, and it's hard for me to pick one over the other, but it's acetate and like really extreme die cutting, right? Like laser cutting. Those are the two technologies that I'm a real sucker for. So like stuff like the best cuts that we were talking about earlier. Basketball's got some fun best cut stuff in '97. They also did the same type of thing with best picks for
Mhm.
basketball in '97. We talked about the net assets, but then when we're talking about acetate, like we talked about the EX2000. So like the whole EX line does a great job with using acetate and adding more on top of it. There's
Mhm.
also a set from 2000, 2001 Upper Decker UD Slam. The
Mhm.
whole set is all acetate. All the inserts are all like everything's acetate. I loved that set. Ripped a lot of it. And they also have some autographs. So there's a Penny autograph. He's in the Suns uniform, the Charles Barkley Suns uniform, and the autograph is on the acetate, which I love autos on acetate. I think that's really cool. And they also have jersey cards, which there's some of the card is acetate as well, so you can see the jersey through the front and the back, which is I think it's
Mhm.
a really cool thing as well. So yeah, it's hard for me to pick between laser cutting and acetate, but those are the top two for me.
You could have those at the top. I think that's fair. Uh, okay, let me kind of take the opposite side of that. Is there any one of those technologies that isn't necessarily your least favorite, but you might consider to be a little bit overrated?
Mm, like of those two
No, just in general.
in
Like
general.
the reality is because this. So I want to start off with the technology, and then I'm going to move on to the insert because there's a lot of inserts. Again, it can still be good. It can still be
Mm,
popular. Overrated doesn't mean bad. This is where I think people get weirded out.
yeah,
It's like, guys,
yeah,
overrated does not mean bad. It just means you're trying to tell me it's number one or number two, and I may feel like that's a little too high. That's overrated.
yeah. It's so for me, like I think refractor comes to mind for that, but I do love refractors.
Mhm.
I'm really gonna people are gonna get upset, but if you're watching at this point, you're not gonna be that upset. PMGs.
Mm.
I think that they don't they don't do a lot for me, right? I get that they're eye catching, very colorful. Especially thinking about like the
See,
'97.
Jake, there's at least one person that just gave you the look.
That's all right.
Jake,
Um,
now you see why I love this so much. It's
right?
like
It's
this.
perfect. It's perfect. But yeah, it takes away from the design of the card, right? The etched
It
foil,
does. It
you know.
does.
So I think that those who can pair the PMG with the base so you can get both, I think that's fun and fine. But yeah, I just especially the price points that PMGs go for, it's just I can't wrap my head. I can't get there.
Yeah.
And I also don't have the nostalgia for PMGs like some do.
Fair. Well, I think one thing that hurt it with the hockey crowd is that for our metal, the original metal, they did not have PMGs,
Right.
so that wasn't available. And in fairness, I'm grateful because honestly, that would have been very expensive and very annoying to me as a collector. Now, actually going to share an Instagram here from Ryan Weber Cards, who
Hmm.
has a tremendous amount of great cards, and actually will play into this because obviously we got different versions of the PMG. Now, I will throw in a little wrinkle to it. I'm actually in general agreement with you. The reason why I thought it was funny that you brought it up, I didn't coach or say anything ahead of time. I wanted to get your answer. One of my buddies who frequents it, he started off with the whole idea that metal universe is like the greatest base set of all time, and then he also cites the PMGs and everything, and I'm like, okay, look. And the more he kept talking about it, the more I kept thinking about it. I go, I love Topps Gold Label. I
Hmm.
love the EXs. Those are fantastic. And then I kept going and I kept thinking about it. I was like, you know what? I don't even have it in the top 10. I'm
No.
sorry. It actually falls way out. When I'm thinking of base sets, even to
SPX.
start, there's so many good ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
But for PMGs, I will say also there are different levels and different types of PMGs.
Yes.
So I think there's some that are a little better than others. Let me use this as an example and also show some Grail level, Favre cards. There's some great cards in this picture. Not none of mine, I wish, but so
Right.
we've got the green PMG, which is phenomenal. That's the classic PMG that people think about.
Yeah.
But that one kind of plays into what you're talking about, where you can see Favre, but everything else is kind of washed out with the greenness.
Right.
It is a color match and everything, which is cool.
Yep.
I actually, if you're talking PMG, I prefer the one in the bottom corner. I prefer
Yes.
the one on the other corner because then at least you've got that. I can still see the stuff going on, but I've got this cool pattern
Right.
swirl with the shine and everything. I think that's the if you're going to talk PMG, I would rather look at the one in the bottom corner. I think that's a cooler
Agreed.
looking card.
Yep.
But four fantastic cards. You got the Star Ruby, and then you got the Immaculate Patch Auto and everything there.
Yeah.
It's just a
There's
cool looking group of four.
there's a Instagram account that has an unbelievable Packers '90s collector. Sal, I think it's Sal has cool cards is the Instagram handle.
Well, there's a name for you. Nice.
Yeah. So sometimes I just look at his stuff and just drool because it's he's got a ton of '90s grails and almost all of it's Packers stuff. So
Sure.
it's fun to look at stuff like that because like while I love it and I would like to get it, we talked about what I'm interested in mostly, and Favre grails of that level that we're just looking at are never going to be high enough on my priority list for me to kind of pony up the money that it would require to obtain them. So, which is
I
fine.
think it's fair. I think it's fair, and I think that's an okay thing. I think the advantage of it is that if it's not like the main PC guy and everything, we can pick and choose a lot more. Like you said, the Mason Crosby thing for you is very niche. It's very narrowly
Right.
focused on a certain thing. I've just, like I said, I've enjoyed going down the far rabbit hole. Badano's still my main guy. That's still my main focus. But it's fun to be able to go because he's got so many options. And I
Yeah.
don't want all of it. There's no way. Like there's just too much stuff. But I love seeking out. Now, what I'm going to ask you, this is a kind of a fun one always. We talk about a lot of the numbered ones.
Hmm.
And one of the things that is kind of fun is the sneaky tough ones, meaning
Mm.
the ones that are high ratio, meaning it's tough to pull, but they're not numbered. But maybe there's a lot in the set. It could be a parallel that is like, actually, this is one in every couple boxes, but because the set has 150, 200 cards, getting that specific copy is
Hmm.
actually very difficult to do. Very
Yeah.
difficult. All right, with the power of editing, Jake has had a moment. We had the Jeopardy music playing. Jake, so tell me, what do you think? Sneaky, not numbered, sneaky, tough cards.
Yeah. So there's three for Penny that come to mind.
Mhm.
Um, Really, two of them are pretty well known. One of them
Mhm.
is a little bit more sneaky. So I'll give you all three though, right?
Sure.
So kind of in order for importance to me anyway, right? So the '97 Fleer Ultra. This is the Ultra Stars Gold.
Mhm.
Gorgeous cards, just absolutely beautiful. These are not numbered. There's a speculative print run on these. I think it's somewhere less than 100. You know, I believe.
Mhm.
So basically, my understanding is the first 10% of the print run they gave that gold pattern. The rest of it has a silver pattern. So at that point, when you're saying 10% of the print run, now you're kind of getting speculative about how much of the print run, all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
But beautiful cards, very hard to track down, condition sensitive, all that shebang. Um, I'll save kind of the more sneaky one for last. This one is all-time favorite of mine. So the '97 EX 2001 Jambalaya.
Sure.
So we were talking about Jambalaya before. These again, another one that doesn't have a print run. People have speculated. There's really no way to know for sure. Because usually the way that you would figure out, kind of do some fuzzy math, is to take a serial numbered card that has pack odds and extrapolate that out. But the serial numbered cards in EX 2001 were serial numbered, but they use the mirror serial numbering, so it makes it very convoluted and complicated. So those
Mhm.
people think that there's probably somewhere around the 200 or less mark.
Mhm.
Um, it's one of those fun ones though to think like they're very sought after, very iconic of the '90s, very valuable. But would they be more desirable if they were serial numbered? And we'll never know. The
Mhm.
sneakiest one, and for a lot of reasons, and another gorgeous one, 97, 98 Triumvirate Illuminator. So the Illuminator, the Triumvirate is the insert set. Illuminator is the parallel. There's three levels to this.
Mhm.
And this one's sneaky for a lot of reasons. First of all, it's probably the lowest print run of the three.
Mhm.
So the speculative print run is less than 70,
Mhm.
but how many exactly we don't know. This was a retail exclusive insert set.
Mhm.
So all of the Triumvirates were only in retail packs. So a lot of them, little kids with, peanut butter and jelly covered fingers like myself were ripping over retail packs, right? So probably weren't taking great care of some of the cards, probably didn't keep some of the cards, right? So like it makes it a little bit more hard to track down. They also get marked incorrectly by all the grading companies, so no one is off the hook on that one.
Yeah.
So the Illuminator parallel is one that is subtle. It's different between Series 1 and Series 2. Not all players are in both series, all that kind of stuff. So the pop counts aren't very helpful in figuring out how many there are in existence.
Sure.
Because I've got an Illuminator of Kevin Garnett that is marked as the base version, right? And I know for an absolute fact they're wrong. But if you go and look at the pop count is going to have at least one Illuminator for Kevin Garnett, not marked as an Illuminator, but it is marked as a base version. So less than 70 copies of the Illuminators, and they get misidentified by all the grading companies, and they're beautiful. So in part of what makes this so beautiful when we're talking about 90s designs, right? You've got die cutting, laser cutting, refractor. This is printed on
I'll zoom in while you've got that there. Go ahead.
So this is printed on an acetate cardstock. It's kind of hard because it's so dark. But it's also a front and back refractor, right? So you can see kind of on that purple. So you've got some of pretty much everything other than having a swatch in that, or a patch. So.
But wouldn't you like them to redo it in 2024, where it's just a flat thing, where they take a picture and it looks like a gradient, and it's just literally them printing
and no die cut, right? Just like
None.
Where it should be cut, it's just black. Yeah, that'd be really cool. Awesome.
Yeah, cardboard stock. It'd be great. Sensational. They could just take a picture of one and just print it on some white stock.
Well, and that's also one that's just like they made something similar to that for a few years, right? In football and baseball and basketball, each sport had their own die cuts, their own laser cuts. I imagine that was a very costly set to make for that 3-year run.
I agree, 100%. I just like I have to poke fun a little bit. We had to come full circle on that one with the remakes. It's like, but wouldn't it be great if you just put it on cardboard stock with no die cut?
I'm gonna write my letter to Santa asking for that this year.
Fantastic. I think that'd be good. So what I'll do is we'll wind down on that. There's plenty more we can do, but one thing I want to be also respectful of your battery life. So that's kind of where we're at on that one. But and also it leaves us plenty of room and plenty of direction to go for a part 3, because we can definitely talk. The fact we can also go into different sports also opens us up to be able to go down that. There's plenty down this 90s rabbit hole. Like we could literally. Sure. I've listened to a couple of the podcasts you've done recently where you got a chance to touch on it, and we got a chance to talk about ones that you didn't mention there.
Yep.
So the point is, this is a great wealth of options and opportunities for us to go into, and there's some other ones we can definitely touch on.
Absolutely, and there's no shortage of passion to talk about it as well.
Ooh, it's very important, very important. So let's wind her down on that. So quickly, I'll say the main things. More videos come up on the channel as always. Fridays live at 8 p.m. Eastern time. We're doing the live streams. This week is going to be normal. Well, actually, let me correct myself. At the time this is going to come out, there will be one more Friday live stream at the normal time and place. But then the following week will be Expo Week, like Shark Week, but lamer. But the point is that we will have that week. And then for that one, the scheduling may change a little bit. Otherwise, though, it'll be normal, and there'll be plenty more videos coming up. And also me going through old Beckets, because apparently y'all are enjoying that. So we'll go back in time. We'll hit the DeLorean again, and we'll go into the old Becket, and see what people were talking about and complaining about in the 90s. And then hopefully after the expo, I will get some more back issues and be able to share more of those with you, with some of the eras in question. And I may even delve in some of the other sports. Some of you already asked, so I may go down that rabbit hole and grab a few of the other sports in the 90s, and we'll have a little fun with that as well. Also, if you want to check out Jake's, his YouTube channel is going to be in the description. It's 90s B-Ball Cards. Jake, do you want to give any of their socials?
Yeah, it's 90s B-Ball Cards on pretty much every social. So Instagram, Twitter, X, Twix, whatever we're calling it now. TikTok, I'm on there as well. And Facebook, I'm 90 B-Ball Cards. So missed the S.
Yeah, it's singular 90 as opposed to plural 90s. So that's perfect. Good stuff. And let's also make sure we get the full tagline, the proper tagline. It is
the most passionate content for card collectors on YouTube and possibly the whole entire internet.
That's what the people love. Good stuff. Jake, I appreciate you having this conversation with me and hanging out for a bit.
Thank you. It was a blast.
Absolutely. So, folks, we will catch you in another video.